Hello and welcome to our Mental Health Board today. This is John Reese. I'm your host for this series. Our series focuses in on local social service agencies in the Southern Kane and Kendall area. Our guest today is Michelle Meyer from Mutual Ground. And Michelle, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here, Michelle. I like to begin each program by asking our guests to kind of introduce themselves to the audience and talk a little bit about your journey in terms of your joining Mutual Ground and becoming part of Mutual Ground.
Sure. Well, I actually, after graduated from West Aurora High School, so I've been in Aurora for a long time, I went to Eastern Illinois University and got my bachelor's in health studies. And during that time when I was at Eastern, I had to do an internship. And because domestic and sexual violence are public health issues, I was able to do my internship at Mutual Ground. And so I did that the summer before I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And once I did graduate, I went back to my waitressing job that I had been doing forever. And the executive director of the program came in and said that there was a position available as a legal advocate. And so I started my journey at Mutual Ground in 2000 as a legal advocate, going into courthouses with victims and helping them through that process. And a couple years later, headed up that program, and then went back to school at Aurora University, got my MBA, and interviewed before the board to become the next executive director, and was given that job. And so I've been in this position as executive director now for 7 years.
Terrific. Many of our viewers probably are aware of Mutual Ground, but I also suspect that many of our viewers are not familiar with Mutual Ground. Can you give us a little background and maybe the history of Mutual Ground?
Sure. So in 1975, a group of women called the Women's Development Council got together at Waubonsee Community College, and were discussing the needs in the community for women, particularly, and what was missing. And what they realized what was missing was domestic violence and sexual assault services. There were no shelters at that time in this area, and programs for women who were going through domestic and sexual violence. And so they formed Mutual Ground and incorporated it and started a shelter above a Presbyterian church. And then soon after that, it grew out of the space above the Presbyterian church and moved into a Victorian home on Lake Street on Route 31. And then the executive director who was working there before me raised $2.5 million to acquire the space we're in now on Oak Ave, and it doubled the bed space we had, and we were able to hire more employees to help with these waiting lists that we had. And so we've been in that building since 1997, but we've been around providing these types of services for 42 years now. So.
42 years, terrific. Mm-hmm. The logo of Mutual Ground, I know it's changed fairly recently,
yeah.
And I really like the logo and the symbolism there. It's a vine with 3 leaves. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that logo and kind of what your core services are?
Sure. So our logo used to be a picture of our building, and our tagline was "Shelter from the Storm." And what we began to realize is that everybody, when they thought of Mutual Ground, they thought shelter. Battered woman shelter, and that's all they thought we did. And so we decided we wanted to get away from that. And so we all came together and decided on this particular logo we have now with the branch with the 3 leaves. I look at the branch as sort of an olive branch, and then the 3 leaves represent prevention, intervention, and ongoing services, because we feel like you need all 3 prongs to end the cycles of domestic and sexual violence. And our tagline is now changed to "Where the Healing Begins," to try to get people away from the idea that we're just a shelter, and that we provide a multitude of comprehensive services to help people move from being a victim to a survivor.
Mm-hmm. That's important, that it's not a kind of a one and done kind of thing. When you're a victim of a trauma, it takes time and a lot of energy to overcome that trauma.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the core services that Mutual Ground of today offers, I mean, historically, again, I think a lot of people still think of the shelter, but you're much, much broader than that. Can you kind of give us an overview of what some of those other services are?
Sure. So to give you an idea, we serve about 1,400 clients a year in all of our programming, and each year about 200 of those people that we serve, those individuals, are actually staying in our shelter. So it's actually a very small piece of what we do. The larger piece of what we do is the intervention services and the ongoing services. So I'll start off, though, with prevention. I don't think a lot of people realize that we're in over 100 schools right now doing prevention programs for kids as little as preschool all the way up to seniors in high school, and in some cases we're going to colleges as well. For the little kids, we're talking about personal body safety. Nobody touches you in your private areas. We practice screaming no. We practice who our trusted adult is going to be, that we're going to tell if something like that happens. When we go into junior high, we're talking about dating violence then. We're talking about sexual harassment, sexual assault, and we're talking about social media and the various issues that presents. And then we're also in junior high and high school providing what's called private room. So private room is there for if anybody is sitting in a classroom listening to us talking to them and presenting and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is happening to me right now, they can go to private room and talk to one of our advocates right then and there. And that's often where kids will disclose abuse that's happening in the home. Beyond the prevention services, we have intervention services, which include our 2 crisis hotlines, our shelter, which is 28 beds and 7 cribs, our legal advocate program, where we go into courthouses with victims and help them with protective orders, and then our response to area emergency rooms when victims present there. The ongoing piece of what we do is that counseling piece. So people could be in counseling for a year, 2 years even, trying to move through that journey. And we provide individual counseling, group sessions, sessions for family members, because it doesn't always just affect the one person. And then also we're trying to move into a space where we can work with non-offending parents and their children to strengthen that bond and help those children get through what is also a very traumatic experience for them.
So prevention, intervention, and ongoing support kind of gives a horizontal picture of what you do, and then there's the unique services in each one of those. This might be a good time, Michelle, you mentioned the crisis lines. You have one for domestic violence and one for sexual assault.
Yes.
Could you give us those numbers, please?
Sure. For domestic violence, the number is 630-897-0080. And our sexual assault hotline is 630-897-8383.
Very good, thank you. Maybe starting with the prevention services, I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. I was intrigued with being in over 100 schools at all different levels. Can you share a little bit about how the services that you provide are maybe a little bit different for each grade level?
Sure. So everything's age appropriate. So obviously with really little kids, we're talking, very plain terms about, the fact that nobody can touch you except your doctor or your parents to keep you safe and healthy. And then we talk about, if somebody is touching you under your bikini area, that's inappropriate, and you should say no, and making sure that they know who they're going to tell if something like that happens. Not too long ago, we were in a first grade classroom, and a little girl was sitting in the room and heard this presentation and realized that was happening to her, but never knew that it was wrong. And so we were able to intervene then, get that little first grader counseling that she needed, try to hold the offender accountable, and hopefully for that first grader, she is going to get the help that she needs at an early enough age.
Amazing.
Where she didn't have to deal with the long-term.
I think at this point maybe we need to take a short break.
Okay.
When we come back, I want to ask you a little bit more about that, okay?
Okay.
Thanks. Hello and welcome back to your Mental Health Board today. This is John Reese. I'm your host for today's program. And I'm here with Michelle Meyer from Mutual Ground, located in the administrative offices are located in Aurora. Mm-hmm. But Michelle, you also have several satellite offices.
Yeah.
Would you share with us where those are?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure, because we have such a large service area, that we were reaching the people that were in the far corners of our service area. So we serve all of Kendall County and the southern portion of Kane. We opened up a office in the Kendall County Courthouse, and when we did that, within just a year, our numbers doubled in that area with helping people with orders of protection. Because before, we had to drive half an hour anytime somebody called to get services out there. And then we realized, wow, if we're doubling the amount of services in the courthouse, we should probably have a counseling office out there. And so we partnered with the Kendall County Food Pantry, and they allowed us space to do counseling. So we're out there twice a week doing counseling in the Kendall County Food Pantry. And then on the northernmost part of our service area, we have a counseling office in Batavia that we staff 2 days a week with a counselor, and her caseload is full as well.
Wow. So most of, or all of Kendall County and southern Kane County is your service. That's excellent. Okay, so back before break, we were kind of talking about some of the services that you offer in school. Mm-hmm. I would assume, and maybe it's an assumption on my part, but I would assume that the students in the middle school and high school age range are particularly vulnerable and in need of your services.
Well, I can tell you that in the last 2 months, we had 17 disclosures of abuse from kids in junior high and high school. Wow. So definitely it's a problem, and it's become obvious to us that they need some place to disclose something that's going on with them. Mm-hmm. And so we're happy that we're able to provide that private room after we do a presentation so that they feel comfortable enough coming to us one-on-one and getting the help that they need and disclosing if something is going on within their home or with a boyfriend or girlfriend or with a neighbor or what have you.
Sure. So if one of our viewers happen to be associated with the school that doesn't have services from Mutual Ground, how might they contact you and see about trying to get some of those services in their school? Sure.
Well, we would work with any school that wanted us to come and talk to them. They would just call our administrative office, and we would send somebody out to do presentations. We also do presentations with their parents, the kids' parents. We do parent programs. And then we also do presentations for the teachers and the social workers. So we're happy to provide any of those services to any schools who will have us.
That's excellent. So then moving forward, the second leaf on the olive branch is the intervention. Can you tell us about your intervention services?
Sure. So we operate 24/7. All of our services are completely free, and so we'll often have people call in our crisis lines all hours of the day and night. We will have people come to our door all hours of the day or night. We sometimes have police officers that drop people off if need be. We are answering those emergency room calls, so the nurses are calling us from Delnor, from the Copley out in Yorkville, the Copley in Aurora, and from Mercy Center, all hours of the day or night, and we are able to send somebody out within an hour to go provide emotional support. Sometimes that just means holding somebody's hand, talking to them about their rights as a victim. Obviously, if they're in an emergency room, those are the worst case scenarios, and so we're talking to them about shelter sometimes in those cases. We're talking to them about orders of protection. We're linking them up with services they may need, whether that's a legal advocate or an attorney, any kind of resources in the community that we can link them up with to make their journey a little bit easier going through this process.
I think talking about sometimes the most intimate parts of our lives, our domestic relationships, obviously our sexuality, is very hard to talk about.
It's incredibly difficult, yes.
And the folks that man your crisis line must be remarkable people.
They really are. You have to be a special person to volunteer for us. And beyond that, you have to go through a 60-hour, very intensive training before you're able to get on our hotlines and volunteer that way. or volunteer to go respond to those emergency room visits. Not everybody can do this kind of work, and you have to be, like I said, a very special person to be able to take that on.
And that they have to go through a 60-hour training? That's a lot of training.
It is. It's very intensive.
Do you offer that on a somewhat ongoing basis?
We do. We do it in the fall and we do it in the spring. Our next one will be, I believe, in April. We just finished one up over the winter, and we had a class of 21 students.
Wow.
So with the staff that we have now at Mutual Ground, we have about 43 people, but you have to remember we're running 3 shifts 24/7. It's never enough. So we really lean on our volunteers to help us reach all the victims that are calling on our hotlines or coming to the emergency rooms or going to the courthouse to help make sure that no victim goes unserved. And so the volunteer services are very important to the work that we do.
If, again, someone in our audience had an interest in volunteering, contact that administrative number.
Absolutely. So that number is 630-897-0084. And we answer those lines 24/7 as well, and they can call in and express their interest to be a volunteer. Also, they can go to our website, and we have an application on our website to become a volunteer, and then we can give them information about when the next training is and how to get in on that.
Okay. What's the address for that website?
It is mutualground.org.
Mutualground.org. I'll make sure I put that on the screen along with these phone numbers that we've been tossing out there.
Great.
I guess, too, it's a good time to ask the question, are services only available in English, or are they available in English as well as other languages?
They're available in English and Spanish, all of our services. And we always have somebody there that can answer questions in Spanish, that can provide crisis counseling in Spanish. And so we recognize that there's a large Hispanic population, especially in Aurora, but in other areas. And about 20% of the clients we serve actually only speak Spanish. And so we want to make sure that they're getting the help that they need in their language.
Okay. We mentioned domestic violence is, of course, a large part of the historic and ongoing mission of Mutual Ground. When someone is experiencing domestic violence, you've mentioned order of protections several times now. Can you walk us a little bit through that process, or kind
Sure.
of how you support people through that process?
Sure. So when a domestic violence incident occurs, sometimes the police are called, sometimes they're not called. If they're not called, we can still help somebody with a protective order. They would just need to call us or go to either the Kane County Judicial Center or the Kendall County Courthouse, and we would walk them through all the paperwork that's involved with getting an order of protection, explain to them what their rights are under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act, and we're there from beginning to finish. Getting an order of protection is not an easy process. It's a 2-part process. You go in for an emergency order. You have to fill out, like I said, a lot of paperwork. You go before a judge. We're there with you the whole time, explaining everything that's going to happen. And then there's another court date that comes after that. So even if you get the emergency order, you have to come in about 2 weeks later, and that's when your offender is there and able to state his or her case. And so we're there through that process, which can be extremely scary for people who've never been to court.
I'm sure that support is incredibly necessary. I think on that note, it's a good time to take another break.
Okay.
When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of Mutual Ground and some of your funding and volunteers and donations and those kinds of
Sure.
issues. Welcome back. My name is John Reese, and I'm your host today. I'm here with Michelle Meyer from Mutual Ground, and we've been talking about the multiple services that Mutual Ground offer. And in this segment, Michelle, as I mentioned, I'd like to start to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of keeping Mutual Ground open.
Yes.
So Can you tell us kind of what your funding sources are like? Because I know that with the economy of the state, that's been a real issue for a lot of folks.
Yeah, the state budget problems hit us pretty hard last fiscal year, but we have been paid up to date as of right now. The federal and state, I should just say government funding we get makes up about 44% of our budget. And then the rest of it, the rest of the revenue that comes in is through private family foundation grants, through fundraising, and through our local mental health boards, Kane and Kendall counties, and through our local United Ways. So that's kind of the way our revenue is made up right now.
You get it from a lot of sources. And I think it's also important because, you know, I do have some history with Mutual Ground through the years. I think it's also important at this point to make sure that people that are out there listening understand that as a victim, there are not fees for services.
Not at all. Anybody can come to us for help at any time, 24/7. We're open, and you'll never pay for any services we provide.
Very good. And two, as we were talking, one of the things that struck me is that when you get into sexual abuse or domestic violence issue, the heart of the problems that are going on in the family or with the individual many times are much broader than just the violence. There's lots of things going on. Mutual Ground able to provide some services, but a lot of referrals out for other issues?
Yeah, we recognize that we are primarily, well, our mission is to serve victims of domestic and sexual violence. Now, every person that comes through our door has multiple issues going on. It's usually not just domestic or sexual violence. And so we're not the expert in everything. People come to our door with substance abuse issues, with mental health issues, and so we are constantly referring out to other organizations and not-for-profits that work closely with us to provide whatever type of other help that they need. And we're very lucky that where we're located in King County, we have a lot of different resources available to our clients, but it's just making sure that they're linked up with those resources.
Do your staff work with the person in terms of helping them learn how to access those services?
Absolutely, yes. It's difficult to know where to go to access those services. And so when somebody comes to us for help, we're trying to wrap around them these comprehensive services we provide. So a person who comes in would get a counselor, a case manager, a legal advocate, and a youth and family counselor. And the case manager, it's really that person's responsibility to link the individual that comes in with all the services that are available in the community, whether that's substance abuse services, mental health services, permanent housing services, employment services, childcare, transportation, any number of issues that they come presenting with when they're coming in through our doors.
And again, one of the things that often happens is in a moment of crisis, a person reaches out for help, but as the crisis diminishes, the perceived need for help goes away. How do you work with people so that we don't get a revolving door kind of situation going on?
That's a great question, and especially with domestic violence services, I mean, I think the stat is that a person will try to get help about 7 times before they actually leave an abusive situation. And so we really just have to meet people where they're at. So whether it's the first time they've come to us for help or it's the 7th time they've come to ask us for help, we are there. And we're there, we're not judging them. We are making sure that they're comfortable and they understand that we're there for them no matter what. And that can be, you know, it's frustrating, but it is what it is. And if one of those times that they come in to get help is that time when they decide to leave, that's great. But we'll keep working with them until they're ready. And sometimes that means they come to us for services and then they go home to their offender. But we work with them on safety planning then. You know, don't have an argument in the kitchen where there are knives. You know, have a plan, a safety plan ready. So have a safe word with your kids if something happens. Have your important documents in the car in a bag so that if you have to leave right away, you have all of that information. So again, just working with people where they're at and making sure that we can provide whatever they need in that circumstance, in that instant.
So You mentioned that about 44% of your budget, I think you said, comes from the government funding. The rest is local funding, and donations, I'm sure, are a very important part of that budget. Can you talk about some of the fundraising events and
Sure.
ways that people could donate or help if they wanted to?
Absolutely. So we have two big main fundraisers each year. One is in April during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and that's our gala, our main event. This year it's going to be at the Embassy Suites on April 27th. And then in October, we also have a main event, which is our Walk for Hope. And that is not only a fundraising event, but it's also a big awareness event. We have over 300 people that come to that event and walk in memory of somebody or to support somebody who's gone through domestic or sexual violence. And so that's a huge event for us too. Beyond that, we have a program that's called the GEM program, which is a Giving Every Month program. And we love for people to sign up for that program because that's a revenue source that we can count on each month and helps us out amazingly. And we've partnered with a local jeweler, State Street Jewelers, who have designed a pendant specifically for becoming a gem. And you get one of those pendants if you donate $40 or more a month with us. So that has been pretty popular. Beyond that, people they do drives for us. So if you think about it, we're running a large household, essentially. And so people will put on drives for us collecting toilet paper, paper products, toiletries, cleaning products, things that you would need to keep a large household going. And if we don't have to pay for those things, more money can go to the bottom line so we can help with services like counseling and case management.
Sure. And the donation of things to help with the operation of the shelter and those are really important.
It really is. It helps us keep moving forward. And
sounds like you're doing an awful lot with limited funds.
Yeah, we're at a budget of about $2.6 million right now. We have 43 staff. We're running 24/7. It's quite a big operation, especially with the satellite offices in Batavia, at the Kendall County Courthouse, and at the Kendall County Food Pantry. We have a lot going on. Prevention educators that are going to schools all day, legal advocates that are going into the courts all day, volunteers that are going into the hospitals. We're trying to be wherever we can to help as many victims as possible.
And your educators don't just go to schools. If I were a member of a social organization of one type or another, the Chamber or Kiwanis, your people would come out?
Absolutely. We will go wherever anybody wants us to come and speak because part of our mission is raising awareness. The more awareness we can raise about these issues, the more people know where to go when they need help or to tell somebody else if they know somebody who needs help.
Okay. And maybe an obvious, but maybe not such an obvious question is, I think when we talk about domestic violence or sexual abuse, we think of male on female violence. Do you have services for men?
Absolutely, and it's a great question. We get it all the time. Men can access all the services that women can access, except for the shelter piece, just because we're not set up for that right now. But we hoped in the future that we'll be able to offer that for men as well.
Great. Michelle, I really want to thank you for coming out today and joining us and telling us about Mutual Ground. We're really fortunate to have your organization in this area.
Well, thank you for supporting us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.